Welcome r/Prorevenge. Pyramid scheme scammer ends up paying in the end. About 6 or 7 years ago, I was trying to enlist into the military. I ended up not joining, but that's a story for another time. At this point, I was led to believe I was about 4 months away from leaving for boot camp. I was running out of savings and needing a part-time job for some spending cash while I waited around. So I did what any enterprising 20-something would do and searched Craigslist for jobs. I normally hate sales jobs, especially those based on commissions, but figured it would be a great way to earn some extra cash short term. Found a few job listings that looked promising and put out some applications. A few days later I received a call from David. He was opening up a new store and needed associates. He liked my resume and asked if I'd be available for an interview on Friday morning. I was very upfront with him and let him know that the distance was a bit more than I'd normally drive for a retail job and asked what he was offering for an hourly rate to see if it was worth the drive. He told me that they were planning on offering an hourly rate in the mid-teens along with commission. Seemed like an okay deal, so I agreed to be there Friday at 8 a.m. Friday arrives as a cold rainy day. I wear a nice shirt and tie and drive in heavy traffic to the address David provided. I knew the area from a previous job and eventually found the strip mall I was looking for. However, I'm not seeing any signage for the company name that was listed. There is, however, one empty space with no signage and 2 people inside. Okay, maybe they haven't gotten the store set up yet. No big deal. I had arrived early, knowing how bad traffic can be in that area. While in my car, I witnessed a young lady in business casual dress remove a sign from the window stating retail space for rent. Call 1800 blah blah. Okay, a little weird, but maybe it's the first day in the space. I walk in about 5 minutes early, and immediately my BS meter goes from yellow to the highest level, black watch plaid. The tables are all simple plastic folding tables. The kind college kids would buy for beer pong while on a shopping trip to Target. The walls are plastered with laminated charts featuring tons of dollar signs, smiling faces from stock photos, and an organizational chart showing an all too familiar shape. A pyramid. God damn it. Alright, might as well have fun for a while to wait out traffic going home. The young lady in the dress approaches me, introducing herself as Cindy. She welcomed me to company name and asked me to have a seat. She sat at her desk, another plastic table, and pretended to go through paperwork. However, she was really just shuffling papers around. We get to chatting, and I ask her how long she's worked for David. She says she's been his secretary for about 6 months, and that I'm going to love it here. Eventually, a guy walks out of the back office. Early 30s, clean cut, wearing an ill-fitting suit from JCPenney's. As he is walking over, all smiles, Cindy says, "Oh, Dennis, our newest recruit is here." The guy stops in his tracks and gives her a cold stare. "It's David, Cindy. We've been over this." He turns back to me and gives me his brightest hard to find good help these days smile. David sits me down and welcomes me, saying they are going to start with a group interview, and has me sit down in a circle of chairs. Eventually more people come in and sit down. David gets up and begins to thank us all for coming. He tells us about an exciting new opportunity from Cutco. He pulls out a set of knives and explains how with his company we can make as much money as we want, all while setting our own hours. He even pulls out a textbook, saying about how this company's revolutionary tactics have even been featured in college textbooks. He opened to a page, his hand covering parts of it, making sure we can all clearly see the word Cutco in large letters on the page. Sad to say, a lot of the other interviewees were very impressed by this. One pregnant girl seemed very excited that she could work around her pregnancy and upcoming birth. David was going on and on about how much money he's made and how hard workers will rise to the top quickly. At this point, David said he needed to take a quick phone call and gave us 5 minutes to have some coffee, chit chat, whatever. As he stepped away, he left his college textbook behind. Oops. So I pick it up, find the earmarked page, and read. As I thought, it was all about pyramid schemes, and it had Cutco as one of the largest examples. It goes on to talk about how these are essentially scams, not economically viable etc etc. So I decide to share this all with the group. I explain how pyramid schemes work and how he's just scamming us. They seemed incredulous, so I said, when David gets back, to ask them about what we need to pay to get started. That finally got everyone to realize what was going on. David walks in a few minutes later, and one of the girls in the group asked David what we need to get started. Well, all you need is your first set of knives to demonstrate. You can sell that on directly, or have them order one, and keep that as your demo kit. Doesn't matter. Just have to pay the startup fees for it. And that's when all hell broke loose. One kid started to get up and tell him to go fuck himself, saying he's wasting our time and he's an asshole for trying to pull this shit. The pregnant girl is crying because she thought she found a place that would allow her to work despite being pregnant. David is clearly confused and flustered and asking who told them all this. When it becomes apparent I'm the wrench in the machine, David gets upset and starts telling me to leave. People are yelling at David. David is yelling at me. Cindy is trying to tell everyone she never met David before today and didn't know what this bullshit was. Eventually we all walk out leaving David behind. As I'm walking to the door, I see, leaning against the wall, the sign that was in the window before retail space for rent. Call 1800 blah blah. As I get into my car I dial the number. Eventually I get through to a person and ask about the property for rent at the location of David's company. The nice lady on the phone apologized, saying they had just leased that property out. I asked if she knew how long the lease was for, as I was really interested in the property. She said she wasn't sure, they hadn't done the official paperwork yet. They were on their way to the space to sign everything with the leaseholder in a few hours. I told her everything that had just happened to me and about David using the space for a pyramid scheme. She got extremely upset, saying that this stuff happens all the time in the industry. They will go to sign, and last minute the leaseholder will decide to opt out after using it for some fly-by-night operation. She thanked me for the info, and I thought that was the end of that. Or so I thought. A few weeks later, I received an email from David telling me how I ruined his life, about how the property management found out what was going on and weren't refunding his down payment on the space, saying he violated a clause in the paperwork he signed to hold the property, how he knew I was the one who called because I'm a terrible human being, etc etc. Now he was out thousands for the space and supplies, how he only wanted to give us jobs and help us. It was a long, very angry email with several things said about me and my mother. So I called 1800 blah blah again, spoke with the same lady I did before, and she was very interested in an email from David where he essentially admitted to what he was trying to do, said it would help them all in the legal proceedings. And don't you know I was more than happy to send that email along to her. Her lawyer said it should be an open and shut case at that point. I like to think I'm a helper. OMG. When I started reading this I was thinking, is this vector marketing? And then lo and behold, it's vector. So I went to a vector sales pitch once, got tricked into it. The guy started to give me shit about 15 minutes into his spiel, because I wasn't taking notes. So I asked him if he really wanted to ask me that, and he got indignant and told me to leave. So I stood up, quickly explained his pyramid scheme to the entire room, and asked if anyone else wanted to save themselves the time and walk out with me. More than half the group came with me, probably one of the most vindicated feelings I'd had in my entire life. Seriously, about all I said was, okay, so you only pay us for the actual sales call, which might be about half hour or an hour. We get a terrible commission of that sale. We get zero pay for any other work we do, including all prospecting, which you don't help with either. So you expect us to sell to our friends and family. This is a pyramid scheme and you are a douche. Those scissors are the shit. However, they are the worst knives I have ever used in my entire life. I was genuinely interested in his scissors. Everything else was just bullshit. I also had a heads up, because about a year prior my cousin had sold my parents a set of Cutco knives. That's why I know the scissors are awesome and the knives are utter shit. I was also a bit angry, because I thought I was going to a legitimate interview. So I got excited when the guy challenged me directly, cause him talking to me gave me the floor to talk to the other marks. When I walked out he hadn't even gotten to the have to buy your own materials shtick, so I bet once he got there with the 3 to 4 people that stayed they got up and walked out, especially after my bit about pyramid schemes. I just looked them up, and it looks like they still have an office in our city. I bet it would be a lot of fun to take a hidden camera and mic to one of those interviews and just try to it up. Exact same thing happened to me roughly around senior year of high school. Once I caught on, I stayed quiet. I was one of 3 people they kept to continue with the interview. I could tell one of the other 3 was dumb enough to get suckered and the other was just trying to see how it played out. I wasted the guy's time for at least an hour, arguing and questioning every detail. I asked if the money we were paying was just a deposit, and we got it back when we returned the demo set. Could we even return the demo set? No. I asked about having the knives loaned on credit, selling from a catalog, lead generation, and whatever else I could think of. I took the whole business apart, as if I were applying to manage the place, or buy it out. Kept it up until rush hour was over. On my way out there was another group of about 15 to 20 coming in for the next group interview, and I made sure to tell them it's a scam as I left. As I pulled away there were maybe 2 to 3 kids left in there. I went to one. The guy demonstrating the knives asked if any of us carried a knife. I did, and do, daily. A CRKTM 16-10KZ. It's sharp as fuck, and I keep it that way. He pulls out a piece of leather and cuts it in half. Hands me half, and tells me to cut in half, while he cuts his half. He saws away at his piece, and I slice through mine cleanly. He wasn't really paying attention to me because he starts to go on about how easily Cutco knives can cut through leather and shows his clean cut. Then I show him my cut which looks like it was done with a razor by comparison. That's when I walked out and was followed by 2 or 3 people. Also this guy was operating out of a dodgy, clearly underfunded, and perhaps fraudulent, after reading your story, office space with sparse, cheap furniture. Good for you. This resonates with me because I was almost sucked into the exact same type of scheme back in 2001 while going to college in the Midwest. The job was in the local newspaper, also selling knives. The guy loved my resume. It literally only had summer jobs from each summer in high school and none of them had anything to do with sales and my potential as a motivated college kid. I said no when it came to having to pay for startup costs. Around the same time period there were a ton of envelope stuffing jobs posted in the papers too, which was a huge scam. I realized then that if seemed too good to be true, it was. Yeah, I have friends who are all involved in various versions of these schemes. Whether it's for makeup or household goods, whatever. I've told them it's a scam, but they swear it's not. One of them quit after I told them the old adage, if you have to pay them, you're a customer, not an employee. I used to have a friend whose dad would go from one pyramid scheme to the next and dragged his kids along with him. Several times he would use my friend to try and reroute me as well. There was one time when he invited over the whole group of us, about 6 other people, for a night of gaming and pizza. Naturally we were all in. After about an hour the food makes an appearance, then sudden his dad shows up and starts telling us all about how we can get in under his other son, not even the one who invited us, in the business opportunity. By this point this was about the 5th time he had tried this with me. The night finished with some awkward, half-interested D&D, because we all knew the real reason we were there, and after that I swore to never go to that friend's house again, and others agreed. Not many people here are giving info other than I walked out of the interview, so here's my perspective. When I worked for Cutco from 09/11, it was either commission or $14/sales call, whichever was higher at the end of your pay period. When I started, you had to pay $150 for your demo kit, but by the time I quit, they had started lending smaller versions for free. I was in college, so it was just a summer gig at first. The manager was your typical arrogant Midwestern white kid, but was smart and loyal to his people. He was also in college. My sales were above average, not outstanding or noteworthy, but I didn't really like doing the sales, or calling up my friends' parents. The knives worked well when new, and you could send them back to the factory for a new set for free regardless of when you purchased them, so I still use them today. After that summer, I was invited to go through the management prep program. It's basically a poorly hidden attempt to get the few kids who stuck around past the summer to sell as much as possible. The kids who saved up enough cash from selling during the school year could open their own branch of the business. I didn't sell at all during the school year, but they were desperate and let me open an office anyway. Opening and running that branch was stressful, to say the least. I had to move to the city where I was opening, find an apartment, find an office, and negotiate the price, purchase and send mass amounts of mailers advertising the job, cold call people, and advertise the job on college campuses. I had to hire and train receptionists off Craigslist to handle the call volume. I went from only having fast food experience to being people's livelihood. Not at all an appropriate level of responsibility for a college kid. It was good experience, but I cringe when I think about how poorly I managed people and how much of my own money I wasted. I interviewed groups of 10 to 20 people from all backgrounds for the sales position. We were told to hire everyone and let them weed themselves out. People will surprise you, etc. Then we gave them incentives for getting their friends to join. This was the hardest part for me, because not only did I reject far more people than my managers would like, I also didn't pressure people to give me their friends' numbers. So my numbers weren't the greatest, but at least I was able to maintain some shred of dignity. My office's performance for the year was subpar, but we did decently during a competition week, and I won a trip to Hawaii with the other kids whose offices did well. I think there were about 100 of us. As a manager, I had access to a lot more documentation, including a pamphlet of common misconceptions about the product, which was buried deep within the company website. Hilariously, all the misconceptions were things that our bosses had lied about to make the product sound better to their employees. As a result, all the managers told their salespeople misinformation, and those salespeople then unwittingly lied to customers. Stupid stuff about the quality of the materials and how they were made. That, along with other moments where I realized that the higher-ups were scamming the low-level managers and salespeople, told me it was time to disassociate from the company. All in all, it was better resume experience than unpaid internships. However, few of the other college kids had the foresight that I did, and easily fell into the trap of telling half-truths in order to get people to sling knives for them. It was pretty disheartening, and I still feel guilty for getting people involved in that company. I used to work in a little prepaid retail cellular store, and one day, this guy, maybe 35 to 40, comes in with his son, about 17 to 18. I greeted them and asked them how they were and if they were looking for something in particular. They proceeded to say they were from the Bakersfield area and were meeting some family and just saw the shop and decided to stop by. I didn't think much of it because we were located on the corner and the windows were big, so it looked interesting inside. Then the guy starts asking me questions, like if I like working there, how long I have been working there, if I had any other jobs, semi-personal stuff. Then he started asking me personal stuff, what I do on the weekends, if I play sports. At first I thought it was like a recruit or something, since I play or played soccer. Then the son started to tell me how he played soccer too. Luckily my boss ended coming in, and they noticed he had a "do you need help or not?" kind of attitude, since he noticed they were there for a good while. They ended up leaving, and I thought that was that. One Saturday evening, before I was closing, they ended up coming in again. I was kind of surprised they came back. This time the guy asked me if I had ever been to Bakersfield, and I said yeah. At this point I was a little creeped out. Maybe this guy was recruiting some guys for a sports team and ended up being a serial killer or something. He then asked me if I would like to hang out with him sometime. At this point I was kind of like, I'm a nice person, so I said it would depend when. They left right away after that, saying they'd be back. A week later, they came in again, around the same time. I was freaked out, because not only was it around the same time, and they knew I would be working. This time they asked me if I had thought about hanging out, and I said yay, and told them I was usually busy. Then he finally told me he was interested in recruiting me to sell some stuff. He told me he liked my energy and how I greeted them, and that I would be a candidate to make a lot of money. When he said money, I was kind of all ears. He then proceeded to say they got merchandise, such as toothpaste, soaps, and other hygienic products for really cheap, and would resell them for 5-10x the amount. At this point he kind of had me. Then he said that all I had to do would be buy some of the products, demonstrate them to people, and sell. This is where I began to get suspicious once again. He pulled out this little book of a company name, and pulled out some products, and also a little chart of a pyramid. Apparently this guy was level black, or some shit like that, which meant he was almost below the CEO level. When I saw the pyramid diagram, I realized what it was, and told him I would think about it. He followed back a few days later, and I told him I wasn't interested, because I didn't have time with work and school. He began to get a little aggressive, saying it wouldn't take up my work/school time, it would be on my own time. I declined once more. Then he got up with his son, or whoever the kid was, and mumbled some stuff like, if only you'd join, you'd know what money was, and I said well I'd join, if I wouldn't be paying you out of my pocket for stuff I have to sell for you. And they stormed off. A guy came into my job multiple times, trying to recruit me to be part of his pyramid scheme. I declined. He got mad.